We have made so much progress getting it up into this point, and this engine internally is absolutely dialed. What's up, FunAhead friends and family? Guess what? This is going to be an exciting episode. We are currently in my Land Cruiser driving to North Carolina. We are on the way to go put everything together that's currently in the back of this vehicle, and that is, well, just about all of the engine parts for my 2001 Porsche Carrera 4. The M96 engine from that car that has been highly modified by Elan engineering to increase the displacement from 3.4 liters to 3.8 liters. And we're doing a lot of other things as well to beef up the engine, to make it the beefiest, most reliable M96 on the planet. Project Beef. So buckle up, because this is about to be quite the exciting episode. Stay tuned. All right, everyone. Well, you are now along for the ride for a full long blocking of my M96 engine. So let's get right into it, because we have so much to do. By the end of this video, we will have this engine fully reassembled with the exception of the cylinder heads and all of the auxiliary stuff. Basically, all of the internals will be put together, but not just put together. We have to tolerance everything. We have to get everything into dimensional spec. All of that stuff has to be tip top. Basically, this entire engine is going to be reset from 110,000 miles back to 0 miles. And it's going to be even better than it ever was from the factory. See why I'm excited? Do you see why I'm excited? Okay, enough talking. I've got about a 7-hour drive ahead of me. Let's get to driving, and we'll pick up at the machine shop. Well, everybody, we are here in the machine shop. I'm actually in the clean room right now. The rest of the machine shop is over there, but they're working over there, so I figured I'd just come in here really quick and film a quick, hey, we're here in the machine shop intro. Let me tell you how this is gonna go down. We're gonna have kind of 3 major categories of things that we need to work on here, one of which actually is largely taken care of by Elan Engineering. So here is our brand new, freshly refreshed, re-sleeved block with the Elan Engineering Nicosil Nickies liners put into it. I mean, what a freaking beautiful thing this is. Fortunately, this saves us a ton of work because Elan Engineering already took care of this. They decked the heads, they toleranced everything with regards to the cylinders. Obviously, they're very clean already, which that normally takes quite a bit of work to do just to clean up a case half. So we are good to go there. The next category, however, has to do with tolerancing. That is going to be probably one of the main things that we're going to be doing while we're here, and it takes a lot of work. Let me explain. So because we're in the clean room, I'm leaving the oily, dirty bearing carrier and crankshaft in its box just for now until we actually clean it. Everything with regards to the crankshaft needs to be toleranced and clearanced. Basically, the crank to main bearings, so the bearings that the crank actually rides on, we need the correct tolerance there. The crank to the connecting rod bearings, which are right here. So these are the connecting rod bearings, the lower end bearings. Connecting rod to the wrist pin and the wrist pin to the piston. All of those things need to be toleranced and be perfectly just so in order for the engine to run properly, in order for proper oil pressure to be maintained. We'll talk about this more as we go, but for now I just kind of want to introduce the concept to you and tell you that in itself is a whole category of things that we're going to need to tackle. And then lastly, the cylinder heads. The cylinder heads are in the other room, but there's a lot to do with regards to those. We're going to be doing a 3-angle valve job, which basically means we're going to be regrinding the valve seats so that they will seal up properly with the valves. And then we're going to be regrinding the valves themselves so that they will mate up with those freshly ground seats. So basically all of the sealing surfaces for all 24 valves will be cherry good to go. In addition, we're going to be decking the cylinder heads so that they have a perfect mating surface with the freshly decked case halves. And then of course we need to reassemble the cylinder heads as well, because currently all of the valves and valve springs and keepers, et cetera, are all outside of the cylinder heads. So we're gonna have to, also we need to clean the cylinder heads. But anyway, we have a lot of work to do. Thankfully, because we don't have to do anything with regards to the case halves, we don't need to start there. For now, let's just get right into it. We are starting with the cylinder heads. And so obviously a huge part of that is cleaning each and every aspect of them. Right here, you can see a sandblaster. And so right now what I'm doing is going ahead and sandblasting all of the valves for some very satisfying before and after. For example, looking at like an intake valve, it has some sand on it, by the way, so don't judge it too hard. This is before, for example. And then here's an intake valve that's after. You can see just how beautiful that is. Here's an exhaust valve. You can see just caked with years worth of carbon. And then here's a finished exhaust valve. Obviously, like I said, name of the game here is cleaning everything. We have the cylinders or cylinder heads rather, in the caustic tank right now. Okay, well, I'm just gonna get to sandblasting. We're gonna give you guys a little bit of a before and after here. All right, try to get through this. So he's got these dope gloves, which are super stylish. Oh yeah. That is so ultra satisfying to watch. And then, yeah, here's the after. That's so cool. So yeah, we just do that 24 times. Next up on the cylinder head to-do list, we're gonna continue cleaning the cylinder heads in the sandblaster. Obviously we had them in the parts washer a little bit ago. Now that these are parts washed and most of the oil and gunk is off of them, we're gonna go ahead and sandblast basically the valve seats. Like any amount of carbon you can see, especially on these exhaust valves here, there's carbon inset inside of the port. In addition, it'll give us the opportunity to shove some sand down these exhaust ports to get some of this carbon out of the way as well. So again, name of the game, just a lot of cleaning. So yeah, tedious stuff, but it's all very well worth it. All right, you guys, on today's episode of This is the Most Freaking Satisfying Thing of All Time, check this out. This is the untouched cylinder head with the sandblaster. Of course, we've got our sweet porting job going on. But you can see still a lot of carbon buildup around the exhaust. And then just in general, you know, inside the combustion chamber area, a lot of carbon buildup, sure. Now, let's look at this. Now, it's not perfect because, again, I'm a total sandblaster noob, but look around these valve seats, there's no carbon. And then I was also, you know, remember how when I did the porting for the exhaust valves, I didn't go all the way down in there. But with the sandblaster, I was able to just kind of shove that thing down the exhaust port and it got all of the carbon out. How beautiful is that? So satisfying. So anyway, I'm going to move on to do this one so we can get both of these looking tip-top cherry. I mean, you guys, just look at this freaking mounting surface for the exhaust manifold gasket. Oh my gosh, it just looks amazing. I want a sandblaster. Bottom line, that's it.
You get a little bit of a lip, but like I can't see a lip there, so I'm gonna like redo it. Better. You see the whole lip of the thing?
Yep.
So it's like I can tell that it's 100% there.
Nice. Oh, wow. Oh la la! Oh! Wow! What's that? All right, now here we are at the cylinder head assembly machine.
You can see we've got two different piles of valve springs. On the right side, we've got our intake valve springs. On the left side, we've got our exhaust. What we did was we went ahead and grouped these by spring rate. We did that by measuring them on this spring rate measurement machine. A little gauge there that tells you how much pounds of force you're putting in by how much distance you're pushing the spring down. Pretty cool. So from that, we took the heavier ones and put them on the intake side because the intake valves themselves are heavier. Now here I am going ahead and putting the keepers back in and compressing one of the valve springs to be able to put the keeper back in. And I'm totally confused because I'm a super noob at this. And boom. Keeper installed. One valve done.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been making quite a bit of progress. Let me show you what we've got. On the table here in front of me, as you can see, we've got the cylinder heads all done. Boom. Both are completely done. And that's what actually has taken all morning. We got here quite early in the morning. It is currently about 1 in the afternoon. It looks like we haven't done much work, but believe you me, yeah, no. Big step. Like I said, that was an entire category of things that we were going to be doing here. Now it is moving on to clearancing the crank with everything else. Let's move on and do it. Hey fella. Hey, look at this shirt this guy's wearing, you know? A little merch plug from Elan over here.
Sponsored by.
So we're officially on to the next big phase of things to do, and that is clearancing, tolerancing.
Before jumping into this, I want to take just a second to explain why tolerancing is such an important and critical step. Here's an illustration of the cross-section of a journal bearing. You can see at the center is the journal, on the outside is the bearing, and between them is oil. The oil is constantly fed into the bearing by the oil pump, then flows out of the bearing. The oil acts as a medium that allows for smooth relative motion for each of the respective parts of the bearing, similar to how rollers behave within a roller bearing. As you can imagine, because oil is a fluid, it changes shape. Therefore, the thickness of the oil film, shown here as HMin, is an absolutely critical dimension. In order to maintain proper thickness of the oil between the journal and the bearing, you need to control the clearance between the two. Too little clearance and you don't have enough of an oil cushion. Too much clearance and the oil flows out of the bearing too quickly, and again, you don't have enough of a cushion. So the tolerance needs to be just right. In the case of my engine, we have several unique considerations from stock. One, I'm running extra width connecting rod bearings. This impacts the amount of time that the oil stays within the bearing, and also impacts the amount of pressure per area of oil within the bearing. Item 2, I'm running ARP main bolts and connecting rod bolts. This impacts the roundness or ovality of the bearing from stock, which also impacts oil flow, so honing will likely be necessary. With that background in mind, let's proceed.
What we're doing now basically is making sure that the bolts are torqued to the proper torque. Once that is torqued properly and good, then we can measure this inner diameter of this big end bearing. Elan has already measured the points on the crank to understand the diameter of these at each and every point. Taking the difference between those two, we can say, okay, that's the clearance. And if the clearance is too small, we can then adjust accordingly. Also, check these units out. We've got our wider Hartech big end bearings installed. For comparison purposes, check this out. You can see Hartech, wider big end bearing, stock. Big old difference. All right, so for the clearancing process, this is with regards to the rods to the crank. Elan is currently checking the bolt stretch, which is like the true, real for real way to measure bolt torque. So, okay, we have
10 thou stretch.
Right at 10 thousandths of stretch. And that is at the high end of the specification according to ARP for torque. So, right in spec. So therefore, once that's in spec, we can now check the roundness of this with the dial bore gauge and then also the tolerance to it. So again, this is zeroed out to the crank journal. And so now we have what? On the vertical side,
2.2 thousandths.
2.2 thousandths of clearance. And then there is some level of ovalness to the big end bearing to help with oil shear.
The magical spec we're going to go for on the rods is like 2.4.
Okay, so 2.4 thousandths, and these are all like 2.1 in that range, 2.1, 2.2, so we're gonna hone those out just slightly. Reason being the wider connecting rod bearings, because there's more surface area. We want to kind of like normalize that pressure. Elan was saying if it was a narrower connecting rod bearing, the stock bearing, we would probably be more down around that 2.1, 2.2, and that'd be fine. We want that little bit larger tolerance. So that's where we're at, you know?
Flip them around too. That way you're maintaining stones and the straightness. Good. Toy. This one's almost good. I'm just gonna like piss this one open. So.
Okay, so we are working on the bearing carrier now. Basically, we just torqued everything down with the new mains in place and measured everything. Turns out our tolerances are a little tighter than what Elan was hoping for. He's hoping to shoot for, I think, 2.5 thousandths again, similar to what we did with the connecting rod bearings. And they're reading a little tight, right around 2 thousandths. Which isn't the end of the world, but basically I think what we're gonna do, considering we're gonna build this engine more for track usage, we're gonna go ahead and maybe hone out this just a few tenths to get it up towards that 2.5, 2.4 thousandths number. So right now I need to basically torque this bearing carrier back down without the bearings so that we can have this at the correct torque level and roundness. That way we can put this thing in the hone. Haha, so I forgot to turn off the shop music. I don't want to get a copyright strike, so therefore I'm overdubbing this. So here is the hone setup, and basically we're going to try and take off just a couple more 10,000ths of an inch. One of the big challenges here is with this bearing carrier itself, because the hone cannot touch off to each of the bearings evenly. That does become quite a struggle. Let's proceed.
Many minutes later.
You guys, this is big. It's a big moment, especially after what we went through with regards to the bearing carrier. The crank is going in, and I figured I'd bring you guys in with the super satisfying footage. Cool. She's home. She's home. So now that we line honed this whole thing, we're basically just gonna put this all, we've got it exactly where we want it dimensionally. We're gonna put this thing back together, torque it down with the crank, make sure that everything spins happily. It was a struggle to get them all exactly where we wanted them, but they are now within 2 tenths of each other, which is an impressive achievement by this guy right here, the expert. Also, when I say tenths, 10 thousandths of an inch, not like tenths of an inch. 10 thousandths. All right, now I do just want to go ahead and clarify what the ding I was talking about here, just because I didn't feel like I explained it very well. Now, there are 7 main bearings in the bearing carrier. Elan was shooting for having a crank to main bearing tolerance of 2.5 thousandths. What I was meaning here is he got each and every one of the main bearings to be within 2 10,000ths, meaning that the range was 2.5 thousandths to 2.7 thousandths. If you don't know, that is a very impressive feat to do, and it's very hard to hone them individually with that line hone, as I was mentioning earlier. A human hair is 3 thousandths of an inch thick. 2 10,000ths of an inch can fit into a human hair 15 times. All right, now with that in mind, let's finish torquing up this main bearing carrier and see how our crank spins. All right, here it is. It's officially torqued down. You know what? I don't even feel worthy. You should do it. You should do it. Does she turn nicely?
That's nice. That's really.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, freaking perfect.
Good.
Just look how beautiful a crankshaft looks when it spins. What a beautiful, beautiful thing for a gearhead.
Now we gotta check the thrust and we're good to go.
Cool. I don't know if my mic picked that up. Elan said he's going to check the thrust really quick. Basically, that's just going to check how much the crank is moving this way in the bearing carrier, just to make sure that that's not out of spec for any reason. So we'll do that, and then this thing is literally ready to be reassembled and put into the engine, assuming that all checks out.
From like 2 to like 10, I would be like, all right.
Three thousandths. Boom.
Happy.
Whoa.
Well, hey kids. It's now time for piston rings. So we have here our brand new pistons that we're going to be utilizing in order to check our piston ring gaps. So I'll explain more on that in just a second, but first of all, look at this beautiful thing. Intake side, exhaust side, that's why we have it noted here. It looks fairly symmetrical, but actually when you look at it closely, you can see that the intake side definitely has larger dishes for the intake valves there. But anyway, beautiful units, JE pistons. They've got a lot of fingerprints on them now. We have the responsibility of setting them exactly where they need to be in order to not cause damage to your engine, but also make proper compression. So we're gonna go ahead and start with the top rings. Those are the compression rings. And according to the little JE piston booklet here, we have to gap the top rings to 18 thousandths, meaning when you look at the piston ring, this gap, the gap between these two sides needs to be 18 thousandths when it is in the cylinder bore. So I'm gonna just kind of set this in there, and then in order to get the ring perfectly centered, that's where we utilize the piston. I've already put the oiling rings in there just to be able to set this down flush. Boom, we've got that down in there. We're gonna take our feeler gauge here and just see what our initial reading is. So, oh wow, this one's tight. I can get the 14 thousandths down there, but this thing might be closer to like 13. Holy cow. Yeah, this thing's about 13 thousandths. I can just barely get the 14 in there. So, given that this needs to be 18, or honestly, we can go slightly over too. That's fine. It's not gonna affect engine power in any measurable amount of way. We need to get this thing from 13 to 18, which means that we need to add 5 thousandths. So, take this ring back out. Let's go over to our grinder. I'll show you how we do that. Okay, here's the ring grinder. You can see here is a spinning sanding disc. It's not spinning right now, obviously. And then we've got our ring fixed on our little jig here. We're just gonna get a rough reading. Okay, we're at about 13. And we need to add 5 thousandths on top of that, like we said. So we will just kind of grind until this thing gets up above, you know, +5 from what it's reading right now at the 0 point. Okay. So we ground it down, should be roughly about 5 thousandths. I'm gonna go ahead and deburr it here. Cool, we've got our ring. Let's go back and check it in the cylinder bore. All right, hopefully you guys can see that all right. I'm gonna put the ring back in here. Bada bing. Let's go ahead and recenter it with our piston. Let's see, ooh, I might have gone kind of over on this. Yeah, so we're at about 20, which is okay. We just needed to be at or above 18 in order to avoid the possibility of the ends of the piston ring touching once they are at full temperature. So this will make plenty of compression. Now we need to just go ahead and finish up all of the top rings and then do the same process on all of the second rings. And then once that's done, we will keep all of the rings in their respective bores because, you know, they were measured specifically for the bores that they are currently sitting in, and then they get installed in that particular cylinder's piston. So now I'm just gonna do that over and over again until we get them all done. Hey kids, just for the sake of being thorough, we're here at the rod balancing machine. You weigh the little end and you weigh the big end. This is your spinning mass, this is an oscillating mass, and they get accounted for differently.
We would take off weight, so say it's like one is 5 grams heavier than the other ones. We would just sand, or you know.
To get them to weigh where we want it. Gotcha.
So we want them all within a certain spec of each other. So they're all within 3 grams of each other.
And we're talking 3 grams on like a 600 gram connecting rod. percentage-wise, that is tiny. Awesome. Well, I guess on to assembly then. Minor hold up. We just realized as we were beginning to assemble everything, we realized that we are actually missing one of the dowel pins that locates the bearing carrier within the case halves. As you can see when you look in here, there is one of the dowels, and then when you look on the other side, this is of bank 1, that dowel is missing. Now of course when you drop everything off at Elan Engineering, they do tell you straight up, if you don't remove everything from your case halves, you will not get it back, meaning dowel pins, plugs, bolts, whatever. Potentially I didn't take those out, but when I went back in that video footage, and from when I took the actual bearing carrier out, the second dowel was not in there. So either I lost it somehow and didn't realize that I dropped it or something, or it was never in there. Either way, we're at a machine shop, we're making a new dowel. So here's our stock. Found it sitting on this shelf over there, and it just happened to be nearly exactly the correct dimension that we need. So we're, yeah, 20 thousandths away from having this thing being our new dowel. Final result of the work that we saw over on the lathe earlier. That's pretty tip-top. All right, you cool cats and kittens. Check out this bearing carrier. We started making a little bit of progress on getting some rods installed. So we have, per the installation procedure, we have the rods for cylinders 4, 5, and 6 installed and torqued. Look at this beautiful ARP hardware on the rod bolts and the mains.
Smack flip, whoop-a!
Well, I've been kind of the world's worst time lapser over the past hour or so, but here's where we're at currently. We literally have most of the short block assembled with the exception of the pistons for bank 2, which Elan is putting together now. He's putting the rings into those bad boys. A lot of just humping around basically and struggling to get things into position, and getting the bearing carrier into this thing is by far one of the biggest pains in the butt, in both of our butts. Our butts are recovering, and the engine is coming together, which is very, very, very exciting. Slap you guys in a time lapse for the rest of the piston installations and the head installs. And then, do we have anything else after that? I think we're literally, I think that's it.
Pistons are in, heads are on.
Yeah.
Tape it up and done.
Tape it up and done. All right, time lapse time. So real quick, if you're unfamiliar, let me show you guys how you install cylinders, or pistons rather, into the cylinders of bank 2. Obviously, being that this is a flat configuration engine, you don't have access to the crankshaft of both sides of the engine in order to, you know, tie down, or torque down rather, the connecting rods. So we have the rods for bank 2 here, but you can see that the pistons are not here. What you have to do in order to get these pistons in and secured is there's this tiny little service hole right here. That is what gives you access to the wrist pin circlips, or the ability to actually install the wrist pins and the wrist pin circlips. You install a piston, you line up the connecting rod with the piston, you insert the wrist pin through that hole, and then you install the wrist pin circlip. So we have the wrist pin installed right now into the piston 6, and I will show you how we install the circlip really quickly. All right, so right here we have this special tool. Basically, this is a dual purpose tool. This guy right here is both a hammer and a wrist pin installer. So we already utilized this to install the wrist pin through that hole. And this tube right here, you can look down there, you can see our new wrist pin circlip. It is loaded into this and ready to go. So what I'm gonna do is slide this into this hole and get that in position. Then we will take our hammer here and bop it really hard to slam our circlip right into place. Hopefully it goes well. And yes, this is stressful, because if you mess it up, you literally have this hole to work through. All right, so yeah, you can see we've got our tool all the way in there, and it is currently inserted into the piston. If you're wondering if this is stressful, the answer is yes. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. The circlip is installed and it appears to be in its groove. Now we just have to turn the crank to the respective positions for cylinders 5 and 4. And you can tell based on the markings U4 and U5, you turn that into this position right here. And then that will allow us to do the same process on those 2 cylinders. So I'm just gonna go ahead and knock that out, and then we can have pistons installed. Whew. Let's do it. We're back, baby. We are back in the FunAhead headquarters. Had a great drive home from North Carolina the other day. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at this thing here. We have made so much progress getting it up until this point, and this engine internally is absolutely dialed. But what we don't have, of course, are the cams up in the cylinder heads, and of course we have none of the auxiliary stuff that goes on top of the motor. So therefore, obviously, we have quite a ways to go with regards to everything else that needs to be done on this engine before we can actually go ahead and put it back up in this car. The main bearing tolerances, the connecting rod bearing tolerances, ring gaps, cylinder heads, the valve seats, the valves themselves, it is completely dialed. This engine is, for all intents and purposes, reset to 0 mileage, and it's better than it ever was from the factory. And I have Elan to thank for every single bit of that. Elan is a total champion. He gave up an entire weekend. We worked 2 basically 14-hour days in a row. There's no such thing as going into the machine shop and just throwing stuff together. Everything is just so precise and requires time in order to be precise. Literally, we had probably 56 man-hours in this thing just to get it to where it is right now. Working with professional machinists is so refreshing, just to know how detailed they get, and there are never any steps along the way that are like glazed over or just kind of like, yeah, let's do it, it's good enough. I personally have the mentality in my life of I always want to do something right. I never want to just skip over it because I know in the end I'm going to end up spending more time on that thing anyway, recovering from my mistakes that I made by skipping over that thing. But even with that mentality, when it's 10:30 at night, your feet are killing you because you've been standing all day, you're super tired, you haven't eaten dinner, I definitely have those thoughts of like, well, we can either just work on this tomorrow, or we can just say, it's probably good enough, let's ship it. It's not gonna cause any catastrophic issues even where it is. But Elan is so good at just, at that point, that's when he shifts into low gear, really sinks his teeth in and says, no, we're gonna spend the time on this to make it right. And I respect that so much. And that sort of thing is exactly what I'm talking about. The very, very detail-oriented mentality. It's in every single step of the way in order to make this be the final product and have it be as good as it can possibly be. I have so much respect for machinists, so thank you again, Elan, you're the absolute man. But anyway, that's gonna be it for today, guys. I really appreciate you guys watching along. I hope you guys found this informative, or at the very least entertaining. I was trying to convey as much information as possible this time around. I hope that came across in the video. So if you did enjoy that aspect of it, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It really, really helps out my channel a lot, and I appreciate it very much. And please subscribe if you want to see even more stuff like this in the near future, because in the next episode, we're going to be throwing this engine back together, getting all of the auxiliary stuff, the cylinder heads reassembled, all of that put back in this engine, and then it'll be ready to go back up in that beautiful steed right there. So thank you all again so much for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. Yes, I'm looking right at you, and I will see you all hopefully in the next episode. Thanks. See ya. Oh, hey everyone, just a quick reminder, super high quality FunAhead TV merch is available on FunAheadTV.com right now. So head on over to FunAheadTV.com and get yourself some today. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Also, thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see even more great FunAhead TV content, please click the link right here. I'll see you over there.